So welcome Gonzalo Munoz, Sophie Ryan, Jason Clay, Amy Novogratz. There we go, close. Today's panel is on a topic which you should all care about. It's the resiliency of the private sector in the face of food shortages. How are we going to keep doing business when the world keeps changing? If you're a farmer, in your father's time, you would go outside each morning and look to see whether or not it's going to rain or the wind's going to be bad. Today, you just open the news on your iPad and you see floods, droughts, and continual unfolding disasters. Business as usual has never been a big thing in the food business, but never has the food business been quite as unpredictable and exciting as it is now. This is not just important for business, but of course those of us who are in business, we like to do business, but it's also essential for feeding the global population. And we know the governments will do many things. Some of them will be very useful and effective, some may be less, but regardless of how brilliant government is, they are not going to solve this for us. And it's going to require the addition of the creative genius of the private sector in trying to figure out how to produce food with much less environmental impact in times of much more difficult conditions. So, Creative Genius Panel is going to talk about it a little bit. And I thought we'd start with a very simple question. If you're in the food business, what can you expect? How do you think things are going to be over the next 5 years or so? Amy, you're sitting closest, so you get to be first.
Oh, great. I think it's actually an exciting time to be in the food business because not only do you have to figure out producing food in a way that's in balance with the planet, you have a growing population, yes, that needs to be fed, but also that needs to be fed well, healthy, nutritiously, and people have much more information about what they eat. They want to know much more about how it's produced. So you start to see the low-hanging fruit around how you can solve some of the big challenges in the food system with digitalization, traceability, real transparency around farming and what the yield is, what the effect is on nature. And so some of these solutions that weren't around a decade ago are now around and connected to real data in the field and actually are able to show you their impact.
Super. Gonzalo, I'm going to jump to you. You are the UN climate champion for food. What if you were in the business of, I know you have farms, what keeps you up at night?
Well, I would say that when it comes to the food system, the first thing that is broken is that it's not fulfilling its objective, right? We're not feeding the people of the world, neither in quantity or properly. We have nowadays 3 billion people under food insecurity, whereas about 800 million people are suffering of hunger and 650 million people approximately with obesity. So the part of the problem is this is not helping, and at the same time we're throwing away about 1/3 of the food, right? So first thing, we need to solve that. Second thing, we need much more food. If the population continue increasing, we need to know where that food's going to be needed in a world that is having a lot of conflictive situations regarding trade and logistics. And we will also that will be impossible to fulfill if we continue damaging the environment. We have to reverse or produce more food, put that food into the mouth of the people that requires it in a nutritious way, and doing that without damaging an environment that has been deployed by deforestation or the oceans when it comes to fisheries. So the complexity of the problem is massive when it comes to the global aspect of it, but then there's another element of that. Food is such a local and cultural element, right? That means different things for people here in London than people in Peking or Santiago in Chile, right? So we also need to strengthen the capacity of every single community to develop their own understanding of what sustainable, resilient food system means.
Thank you. Jason. Jason leads market transformation global market transformation for WWF. He's been at it for a while. Jason, if you were counseling your children who are going into farming, what would you tell them to be ready for?
Maybe leave the business? No, which is what I did, actually. So I think that the issue is that whatever is more sustainable today will be average tomorrow and will be something we need to fix the day after. And I'm not speaking literally days, but definitely years, not decades. And so we need to be thinking about change all the time. That means we need to revisit the business plans. We need to revisit the strategies. We need to revisit how we're partnering with our supply chains to make the investments that they need to be more resilient. I think even just something as simple as knowing who you're buying from is going to become much more complicated when 40% of your supply chain shifts every year because of extreme weather, because of chronic drought that's starting to build up and producers aren't responding fast enough to it. So one thing that I just like to put on the table right at the outset is we're still in a world thinking about averages when what is happening in the world is anything but average. And we need to get out of that because the bottom 20% of producers or any commodity will produce 60 to 80% of the impacts that we care about. So we need to either get them fixed or get them out. We're focusing all our attention on the better producers. It's the worst ones that are causing the problems. And they're often the ones that hang on too long. So we've got to figure out how to do this, how to retire them, how to create markets for things they could sell, environmental services. They could retire the land. It's marginal. It's not very productive. They produce half as much, per unit of effort as others. So we need to really rethink what our strategies are. And all of this is happening when we're focused on what we can do in food to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Well, now we're seeing that natural forests, natural grasslands, mangroves, and even the ocean itself is releasing carbon dioxide. We've opened Pandora's box here, and the food system is going to have to figure out not just how to fix food, but how to lower emissions for these other habitats and how to increase nature in food production in a positive way.
Thank you. So Sophie, you're the CEO of the Global Salmon Initiative, which has been sort of a remarkable thing in terms of the leadership it's been able to bring salmon farmers from around the world to solve problems. Take us down a street level. What do those problems feel like when the companies get together to discuss them?
Big, to say the first thing. But I think first, let me break down as the salmon industry and perhaps the food industry actually see those challenges coming. And I think it's important then to see how big they are. But I think when it comes to climate risk, there's two categories of the challenges the food sector faces. The first is the ecosystem risks, and that's the supply chain. So how a changing climate, the storms, the droughts are impacting the crops we need to feed, in our sense, the salmon. But it's also what's actually changing in our environment. So whether that's raising water temperatures or increasing rain, decreasing rain, that's all going to impact our operations. But on top of that, you also have the human risks. All of us here have day jobs that take our attention, and we also have requests of us, whether that's from our bosses or from governments or other civil organizations that ask for data or more information from us. And perhaps that can be slightly distracting. So together, you've got those ecosystem risks, those human risks, and that's why when we come together, lots of the businesses don't actually know how to take them all on at the same time. How can you have that long-term vision to start making the changes needed to address those risks when you also have to focus on what's happening right now? What are the impacts you're seeing from a changing climate right now? How do you work on those, but also have the space and the capacity to take a step back and actually make some long-term changes? And I think what we've seen in GSI is that that's impossible to do alone. That actually we need to bring companies together, not only within the industry, but also with partners and friends like we have here, to help us be aware of what's coming and start discussing what are you seeing, how are you adapting, what's working, what's not, and most importantly, how can we learn from each other? So I think, in summary, it's a big problem and we can't do it alone.
Thank you. So let's move a little bit we've already started to do it, from rehearsing how impossible the problem is to how the solutions we've seen work. We got a system that feeds some people in an unhealthy way, fails to feed other people, that's using up more natural, drawing down the natural resources faster than can be, that's producing more pollutants, whether they're greenhouse gas or other effluents, more than they should, and a lot of turbulence out there. Amy, you started by saying this is exciting, which is, can be interpreted all sorts of ways, but then you said, if you've been thinking...
Not exciting, but a great opportunity.
Yes, but if you think about it as an opportunity, things you've been thinking about, all of a sudden people want to hear. So share some of those with us.
So we, about 10 years ago, started a fund investing in the transformation of sustainable aquaculture, and started to see, actually, you can farm salmon, but shrimp, all aquaculture species, in a way that's lowest footprint, most resource efficient, healthiest, in a truly sustainable way. We saw farms that were doing it, but they had to produce their own feed and do everything on their own, so you can imagine the fish were really, really expensive and only worked at the San Francisco Farmers Market. But if you start to invest in these different solutions and start to scale them while working with operations, you can start to move things forward. And Sophie just made the example of all of us really needing to work together. We built this ecosystem of stakeholders. It's really growing in aquaculture in general, because a lot of the producers want to do the right thing. They realize that doing the right thing is better results. They have their ponds for longer. They behave better. It costs less. So they make more money, but it's hard to get them to that place because they need the resources to get there, the knowledge to get there, and they need the other supply chain players to value what they're doing and how they're doing it. So it's really kind of getting the whole industry around the idea of the vision of where something can get retailers to buy in, get the investors to play a certain role in it, and get consumers to understand how to make the right decisions without giving them a ton of work in understanding and making that decision, but helping them trust it. I mean, I think all of us would love to get back to a food system we could just trust, and right now we're really far from it. So it is. I mean, we've invested in bacteriophages that are replacing antibiotics in farming, in technologies that can give you real insights around when to feed and save mass amounts of feed in your operation. We've invested in alternative ingredients, so you don't have to rely on natural resources for fish meal or for fish feed anymore, but you can use microbes and insects. You can really kind of invest in every challenge out there, help to find the solution if you can piece it together and make sure everyone has the same vision on how to get there.
Fantastic. The place where I grew up, we used to have an expression that we all have to be kicking with the same foot, which is sort of a rural version of sharing a vision and sharing a process of going forward. And you've had good experience with kicking with the same foot. Sophie, GSI has been somewhat remarkable in its capacity to bring together folks with a similar vision and working together, and I'm hearing working together is what matters. What's the secret sauce? How have you pulled this off?
I wouldn't say, well, we'll see if it's a secret sauce, but we do have the GSI's 10th anniversary tomorrow, so the initiative has been going for 10 years, which I think is a remarkable milestone for bringing competitors essentially together to work on these core issues. But the way we've done it, I think, is actually a lot through the CEOs themselves who are members, from really seeing that the problems were too big, that they had to work together. But actually, with many food sectors, when you go to buy a product, you buy the product. You don't really buy a branded product, particularly in salmon or different meats or proteins like that. And to Jason's point earlier, if a producer isn't doing the right things, should we retire them? But I understand there's definitely places for that, but there's also the role of actually helping them improve. That actually what we took on in GSI was if we can lift the whole sector's environmental performance, we can actually raise the reputation of the whole sector and hopefully build the sector that way. But with the CEOs coming in and really putting pre-competitive kind of spirit behind their sustainability improvements, I think they've seen that they can get huge value from working in this way. And perhaps I can just kind of explain those in 3 key ways. The first is that, as I'm sure we all know, when we have a problem, we perhaps think on it ourselves, but then we may float ideas past, family members, friends. Are we on the right track? Have I missed anything? And really, by working together, we're often much smarter. We might not always agree with what other people have to say, but we're often much smarter. We've perhaps seen things from different perspectives or added in different considerations. And that's essentially what we do in GSI. Bring the companies together to pool their resources, their experiences, their expertise, to challenge each other, really see what's working, what's not, and how can they learn from each other, and often use that competitive spirit to actually motivate them to go perhaps a little bit further than they thought they could do alone. But one of the big things I've heard listening into some of the sessions today is we all know these risks are coming, and one of the big kind of responses to that is collect data. Let's collect more data, let's understand what we're doing, let's see where we can improve. And yes, we need more data. I think we all need to know what's going on. But also from the industry and the companies, we also hear that there's a lot of data fatigue, that actually they're collecting so much data, and where is it going, how can they use it? So another thing about being in a collaborative group is actually you can work together, standardize, align how you're collecting data, rather than collecting data in all different forms. Let's standardize it. And again, coming back to then you can use that. It's much easier then to interpret what this data means if it's all done in the same way. And in GSI, we've not only done that on key sustainability metrics, but are now working on a way to do that in greenhouse gas emissions as well. And it's not just data for the sake of being transparent, it's data for the sake of learning from each other. So how can we then take what's in there, look at companies that are doing well, perhaps looking at companies that aren't doing so well, but again, start that discussion of how can we then improve from that.
So I've heard two. I'll come back to you. Don't worry. I've heard two sort of general approaches. The one is shared vision and get all the players kicking with the same foot towards it, bringing people together to learn from each other. Gonzalo, where do you see the essence of this solutions? It's very easy to rehearse the impossibility of the problem, but we can't afford to stop there.
Right. I think that, taking Jason's word, this is a matter of urgency, right? So unfortunately, we don't have enough time to potentially do the ideal, perfect, non-frictionary solution. Rather, we have to move much faster into what can deliver the type of impact that we need nowadays with all of these crises happening at the same time. And I have to refer to many of these problems that we're facing today were quite referred back in 1972 with the Stockholm Summit. So it's not something new. And I think that it's important for us leaders to understand that we have been very dumb as a species. We have been investing a lot on reducing the value of the evidence instead of putting our money and the actions toward the solutions that we know were required. That has been part of the problem. The capacity of focusing in the short term, both financially and politically, that is leading us to this problem. So when it comes to the business sector, and I'm speaking as an entrepreneur myself, as a farmer, I think that it's important to commit to certain topics that are kind of acupunctural in terms of the solution. Probably one of the most important one is the methane agenda. Meaning that we need to reduce we have to first, as Sophie was referring to, the use of data. It's not only about using the data and measuring right properly, but also, I would say, rewarding in our value chain, in a company, the right type of impact. And I would love to see companies rewarding for methane reduction in the whole value chain when it comes to food production. That means not only stop damaging the environment, as Jason was referring to certain places where most of what's happening is that we're releasing methane emissions, but also we need to stop losing 1/3 of the waste of the food that is being produced. That should bring us all to be committed to stopping food waste and loss. That is a very big gain and will connect that to stopping damaging the biodiversity, reducing greenhouse gas emissions or equivalent in all of our value chain, having a different type of conversation amongst our providers and our team, but also having a different conversation with the consumers, understanding that this is a problem that at the end is bringing us all together, but there are some people that has the power to really unlock those solutions. In this right moment, financial institutions and CEOs have the most important capacity of delivering those short-term solutions that will probably, potentially, help us move forward with other ones that will not only help us solve the climate crisis, big chunk of the food system that is broken, and also many parts of the biodiversity crisis that we're also confronting.
Super.
That was a great comment, but I would add entrepreneurs and innovators into that group as well.
For me, that's business. Okay, right. I mean,
Right.
you're totally right that most of the time we're talking to the big CEOs in this moment, and I'm talking as a co-founder of the B Corp movement. I truly believe on the capacity of SMEs of the whole world and innovators to disrupt and change the logic on how things are being done. We have to disrupt and unlock certain logics that we're trapped in. I studied agronomy and veterinary medicine. I was told to monoculture. That's stupidity.
Yeah.
Nature is not monoculture. We are not monoculture ourselves. We're embedded with millions of species in our body, right? And we're thinking that just one species will create prosperity in a certain surface or volume. That's stupidity. We know that nature doesn't express its best with one single species, but rather with the combination of different species. And that is a paradigm that we are setting apart just because we have been educated in a certain way. We could have been educated in a different way, as nowadays is happening in different parts of the world.
Fantastic. Jason, I want you to imagine waking up tomorrow morning and sitting beside your bed is a strange lamp. And you pick up this lamp, and out comes the genie. Genie might look like Gonzalo, it might look like me, you don't know. I'm not going to say what the genie will look like, but the genie says, Jason Clay, for the last 20 years, you've been hoping
50
industry.
years. We just heard 50 years.
All right, for the last, I was trying to be gentle.
Why be gentle?
For the last 50 years, you've been hoping industry leaders would transform food production. You get 3 wishes, and I will make industry leaders do them. What are your top 3 wishes? You can stop after 1 or 2 if you want, but 3 always seems like the right
So
number.
let me just give a kind of gestalt comment first. We need to learn how to build the plane while we fly it. Change is at that speed today. And so one thing that I would do is make sure that any insurance payment for climate change is actually used to invest in something different, not what was. Because we've got to use the money we have now to create the changes and the resilience that we need in the future. Same with subsidy programs for governments. Why support things that are failing when we actually need investments in many things? For venture capital, I would say there are 6 environmental impacts that every food system produces. And they're the most important. Deal with those 6. Venture capital is off making a lot of money if they're successful, but they're not solving those 6 problems. We need to focus the capital on where the problems are, because everything is going to take finance. Finance is going to be extremely important. We've seen GSI, what they've done. They've probably convinced, because they've made active efforts, they've convinced governments to give them some time to actually do things that make sense now, because they've shown that they can work together to do that. I mean, I know for sure this has happened in places like Chile, et cetera. Well, can we convince banks to do the same thing? Can we convince banks that you're not the exceptions, you're the norm that everybody else needs to become? And so how do banks set up actually investment screens, period, that reflect the values that they have so that the free riders can't get by? How do we use the market to generate funds that are going to be producing the food that we need in the future? Well, one thing is to not let the market mine resources around the world. This is the new kind of imperialism. This is the new kind of colonialism. We've got to stop mining natural resources. Food shouldn't be traded globally, and for the last 40 years, every 20 years, it's doubled, so now 30% of global food is traded. We need to make sure that that food is maintaining or increasing the fertility of the production system, not mining it. And if it's mined, it shouldn't be allowed to be exported. I mean, there are things that we need to put in place that actually need to start happening, and they don't cost a whole lot. And if I think no company can do any of these things by themselves. No country can either. And so we've got to start thinking bigger at a systemic level in the way that's going to, I know this didn't answer your question, but.
It's a very good answer to the question I would have asked if I'd thought of it.
So we're going to let.
You're going to be in trouble tomorrow when it actually happens and you're not ready.
He'll be ready.
You will.
I'll come up with a coefficient.
All right.
So I just have to say, because I always agree with most of what you say, but I do think impact capital can make money and really solve some of the big challenges in farming, especially in aquaculture. And we've seen proof of it around investing in alternative feed ingredients, protecting kind of ocean biodiversity. We've seen proof of it around investing in aqua technology that's making farming way more efficient, bringing data that enables fair financing for farmers, and kind of going back to what Carmen Gonzalo said, and I think this is where aquaculture, and I don't know how it is in ag, but 90% of the producers in aquaculture are small-scale farmers. So if you actually get them to do things differently, you have a lot more change than the one big industry player. At the end of the day, you need everyone to kind of adopt the new practice in a new way, including the kind of the certifiers, the retailers, the consumers, et cetera. But it gets exciting, and there's where I say, when you can see the actual producers having the tools, the knowledge, the financing to be the ones to kind of change the game and the standards and deliver a better product and perform better, get better profits, and that's. I do think if you're going to kind of develop a new industry, it needs to have some commercial aspect to it that, people are making money from what they're producing. And we've seen in
Every
aquaculture,
farmer's a businessman.
we've seen in aquaculture, and maybe again it's in other farming as well, because fish are such sensitive creatures, because the water quality means so much to their own immunity, growth, et cetera. It's the second time I've said et cetera, maybe in my life, but both in the last minute, excuse me. Because of that, when you have better, more resilient, sustainable practices in farming, you get better performance. So we're seeing kind of tech adoption and different feed ingredients and whatnot deliver better financial results for the farmer and investor as well.
But where do you make that pre-competitive? Let me give an example for farming that I think that's right on, is that if you look at oil and gas companies, no individual company exploits a concession by themselves. They always go in with 3, 4, 5 companies that represent different markets, one usually represents the government of whatever the country they're in, et cetera. And so if you look at biotech and seed, now with genetic engineering, why are seed companies competing in the marketplace? Why aren't they sharing? We have to develop new seed varieties for drought resistance. We need new biological seeds rather than chemical seeds. We need to be able to use biology instead of chemistry going forward. We can learn this faster together than we can separately. We don't need 4 or 6 or 8 steep learning curves. We don't need certainly 6,000 or 60,000 or 6 million learning curves from farmers. We need to all be sharing information so we learn much more quickly, because there's still enough that we don't know that it's going to take forever.
Let me jump, and I'm going to get to Sophie in one second. I'm just going to jump in from my own experience of companies working together. These are very risky times, and risk assessment done with one set of eyes is nowhere near as good as risk assessment done with many eyes. So companies sharing what they're seeing out there is just important to survival. And then solutions. Solutions found with all sorts of different company cultures applying themselves. So they're all geniuses at other things. Better solutions are found. And then solutions shared. If all people are doing is grabbing a solution and hiding it, that's great for the company for a short while, but in the long run, we all lose because the whole sector starts to deteriorate. Sophie, you've had direct experience of this. Do you want to share some more?
Yeah, and just to kind of elaborate on that, I think it's not just about the sharing, that's hugely important, but it's also, as we've heard, we have lots of risks coming, lots of different risks, and those all cost money, they cost time, and we could just share them, or we could start duplicating them, and of course there's benefit if we can share them. And that's what we've done within GSI, is We have a fish health and welfare task force, which I'm not going to go into the details for all of you on the health of salmon. But we bring together the technical experts from all of the companies, and they look at the challenges they're all facing, whether that's sea lice or a changing climate, and all the technologies that are coming to that. And they start sharing, what are the benefits of these technologies? Are they working? Yes, this works in this farm here, but only if the water's this temperature. But if you look at this farm here, it's not quite working. But if we change this, and then we bring the suppliers in to have that direct engagement as well, so we can hopefully not only share what they're seeing, but also help that innovation much quicker, so that we can try multiple different things at a shared cost, shared time, and then really see the ones that are driving the biggest impact, and then start implementing them across the farms.
Gonzalo, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was reflecting on the concept that you brought in terms of the importance of sharing that perception of risk. As Sophie was referring to, there are, of course, some transitional risks related to regulations and of course, even the behavior of consumers when it comes to food consumption. But also there are many other physical risks, and sometimes, as I was thinking about most of these food systems, starting with even small companies or even sometimes big but isolated, they need to connect much faster and in a much stronger way. And even in the value chain, the brand owners or the retailers can support that, should help on creating the conditions for those organizations to really interact in a much faster and productive way, even when it comes to the insurance mechanisms that they will be required when it comes to all the disruptions that climate is bringing.
I'm going to see if there are any questions out there. We still have a little over 8 minutes. Outrageous questions will be applauded. Don't be shy.
There's a question there.
The mic is speeding in one direction. Please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, this is Srini from Aguesto, company from insurance background. One of the questions I have is naturally different lawmakers are having different interpretation about what you call ethical and sustainable fishing globally. In your experience, what kind of impact that you're seeing a local lawmaker that could do when it comes to the industry? Are you seeing them to be more proactive, or are you seeing them to be having a stick approach when it comes to fishing?
Sophie, you look like you want to jump first.
Actually, I can make a small comment, but
Go ahead.
I mean, there'll be huge differences in the regions, the governments, the different setups, of course, but governments, of course, play a huge role in setting the framework, setting the guidelines that's going to help an industry improve. But really, as we heard earlier, I can't remember who said it, sorry, but we're going to need a lot of innovation, a lot of creative genius to actually get to where we need to go. And I would say that actually it's the people sitting in here and working in the industry and the businesses that are going to actually drive the change. But of course, we need connection between the two to check that both can move in the right direction together.
Amy, do you want to jump in on that one?
To be honest, I missed the exact question. I don't want to, but I mean, we think that the real focus should be on improving aquaculture. We can't get more fish out of the ocean than we're currently getting out of the ocean. The population is growing. Fish can be a perfect, really healthy, nutritious protein food source for the growing population. Where it's growing most is actually already fish-consuming populations. Aquaculture is already kind of performing, better than beef when it comes to footprint, but we can do it so much better and sort of put our energy there and to produce fish in a really sustainable way, to culture it versus catch it from the wild. But was that your question around wild caught fishing?
Yeah, predominantly there are different legal interpretation of what can be and what can't be in any given market. For example, there was a huge debate during Brexit about what could be done in the British Isles. But I'm also looking at an emerging market where, in certain countries, it's highly not institutional ready. Very small holder, hardly any financing is going through. So the aquaculture community is looking at government as majority source of financing. There's hardly any private sector capital flowing in. I know you guys are financing some interesting projects, basically. So there's always a challenge between what a lawmaker wants you to do versus where the private sector is versus where the value chain is. So right now it feels like an uphill battle to even get money from the government to do certain bits in aquaculture industry. So that's basically, predominantly the question. So the crux of it, in our experience, has been as long as there's a strong export story and it's very critical from a national point of view, you get some support, but majority of the other sector has been left behind compared to, you take a dairy sector in Latin America, for example, versus an arable sector in the UK.
Okay. Next question. Thank you.
Hello.
Yep.
Gonzalo Alvarez from the United Nations Association. Jason, you mentioned about the role of banks and the financial system in the world, which is obviously very, very important. But if we address the issue from the northern perspective in terms of wealthier countries, which we are at the moment, of course, one of the largest developed economies in the world, surely part of the answer would be to focus on developing countries which need to survive the risks for the future, and surely that would mean to reform the global institutions, such as, for example, the IMF, which wealthier countries have power of veto, impacting negatively poorer economies. How do we reverse that in terms of climate justice, for example?
So, Jason, you've been asked, you better grab for that genie, to explain how to get the IMF to work.
That's way beyond me. I tend to focus on the World Bank, the IFC, the Asian Development Bank, and the regional banks, or even private banks. But I think that right now, nobody is telling financial institutions what the key impacts are that they should be screening against in any investment. And we don't have 50 years to figure this out. We already know what those big impacts are. So can we start with that? And however the IMF props up local currencies and global trade, fine, let's bring that in. But every company, I think, has the responsibility to help make their supply chains more resilient. And they can do that not by providing them with cash, but providing them with a 5 or a 10-year contract, a long-term contract where there's a price-finding mechanism that's fair to both sides, and that can be used as collateral to borrow money to make investments in more sustainable production and in more resilient production. So not all of this has to be done from the top down. I think we need to use the market mechanisms that are out there and long-term contracts, and they're putting conditions on them too, from animal welfare to whole new production systems to deforestation-free to carbon accounting, et cetera. All of those things have to come with the purchase now, but there's also money to cover the costs. And that's where I think the food system needs to cover the cost of the food system. We're not covering the actual social and environmental externalities of food production right now. Even a 1% environmental payment on global trade would cover it for food, for most of it.
That was a brilliant dodge of saying tax.
We have a long-term structure. It's an open-ended fund structure, and have yet to get any institutional investors or any of the larger institutional investors in it because it's different than the way they normally think. We have a very clear impact metric framework, but it doesn't check their exact boxes. It's not black and white, and we keep saying, well, what's happening now isn't working. We need a new way forward, and that's a hard message to certain investors.
So let me share experience that the GSI is working with the Gates Foundation on increasing aquaculture in sub-Saharan Africa. And the approach is not going to be subsidies or funding projects. It's going to be developing the detailed business case for investment in smallholder Africa, aquaculture, fully understanding the market economics, figuring out where the missing pieces are, like communications or getting the smallholders to talk to each other or feed plans strategically put, and then letting the marketplace work for the production. In other words, unleashing the power of the private sector, not just for the northern countries, but for the in sub-Saharan Africa. And if I were betting, I'd bet on that before I bet on changing the IMF. We still have 17 seconds. So Gonzalo, you get them.
Yeah, I just want to refer to one aspect that I want all of you to take into consideration. For this COP28 in Dubai, the presidency decided to put the food systems and agriculture transformation into the center of the agenda for the first time. And we expect to have a global leaders declaration, meaning all member states to be signing, hopefully at least 140 or so, signing a declaration of what that means. And that includes many of the topics that we have referred to, including the Development Bank evolution, right? But including also aquatic food and regenerative agriculture and reducing food waste and loss and innovative food. And then there will be a big part of the agenda in relation to what non-state actors, in this case businesses, but also subnational governments, can and should provide for this agenda. And we do expect that we can develop a bridge from COP28 to COP30 in Brazil, where countries will have to enhance their NDCs, and hopefully they will integrate food system transformation into the center of their national agenda. That's the task that we have ahead, and we expect every single food company and financial institution that is related to the food sector to be absolutely committed to this cause and helping for this to accelerate at every level in every region of the world.
So a summary statement, business as usual, not a chance. Problems hugely complex. The center of the solution is more likely to be the private sector, though government, I wish government would solve it all, but I wouldn't bet my life on it. So private sector is going to have to play a huge leadership role, and when the private sector works together, sharing understanding, sharing solutions, working, as you said, with a common vision, or as they said in my hometown, kicking with the same foot, we stand a reasonable chance of actually doing good stuff. Thank you all.
Thank you.